Listeners, we have a small but exciting format change to tell you about. We kept noticing the same problem. We'd get into a genuinely brilliant conversation with a guest and then face an impossible edit, cutting out quality content that, in all honesty, would be an upgrade to most other politics podcasts, just to squeeze everything into one non-intimidating 1 hour episode.
And we know from your feedback at our editorial meetings that the deep dive topics are exactly what you want more of, not less. So we've just decided to stop fighting it. We're giving in to you. And from now on, when we have a guest, we're going to split the show in two. So your newsy section will land on Thursday as usual, and then the full uncut deep dive will follow on Friday morning.
Same week, same guests, nothing left on the cutting room floor. You get 2 commute episodes and, of course, Sunday school. We hope you enjoy getting even more Quiet Riot for your buck, and we reserve the right to play around with the days and duration of the shows as they go out to get it bang on, but we'll give you a fair warning of any other changes.
So this week, we're talking about that HS2 report and the seeming failure of modern British governments to effectively project manage any infrastructure build-out. And then tomorrow, we're going to be covering all the latest from Palestine, including a look back to the Balfour Declaration, the two-state solution, why it's in peril, and what the hell we can do about it.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, the politics podcast that is as knowledgeable about guilt refinancing as it is about Strictly Come Dancing. I'm Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith. We're here to bring you sobriety instead of anxiety and humour in place of rumour.
We try to clean the signal from the noise because the last thing that happened is not always the most important thing that happened.
So brew a cuppa, take a breath and settle down for the weekly political group therapy that is Quiet Riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex. I do the scrolling.
And I'm Naomi. I do the polling.
And I'm producer Kenny. I try to do the bankrolling, patrolling, cajoling, time controlling, lolling, and even the rickrolling.
An occasional trolling. This week we have decided to give you some respite from the Labour telenovela,
Hooray!
Seeing as we have weeks of it ahead, and ask a more important question. Why is the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution unable to build a train line, or a runway, or a power station, or enough housing, or a burger that doesn't fall apart? To help us, we are delighted to welcome back a friend of the show, the Liberal Democrat MP for Oxford West and Abington, the chair of the Health and Social Care Select Committee, Layla Moran. Welcome back, Layla.
So happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Layla, your gorgeous little girl arrived last year and now you're in the tricky position of juggling parenting and Parliament. And I wanted to ask you how becoming a mum has made you view or review employment rights, parental leave, all of that kind of stuff. What still needs to change?
So a couple of things are definitely worth a mention. And one, I'm just really proud that no one noticed, which was, I believe, that we were the first same-sex couple to have a baby in Parliament.
Oh, wow.
I don't believe that has happened before. Tell me if I'm wrong. I keep
No,
asking.
I can't think of one.
I think
Yeah.
it's correct. And that's so cool.
Very cool.
First of all, that's so cool. So we had the situation where my partner carried, but I'm also a mother. That brings up questions of like, well, maternity, paternity, shared parental leave, all of that stuff. There is another thing that I'm proud to say I did, which was noticed a bit more, which is I'm the first ever select committee chair to take parental leave. So, in time-honoured Parliament tradition, this was a right old mess. My sex and the fact we were a same-sex couple actually didn't matter as much. The proxy vote was already in place. The wording had originally tried to distinguish between man, woman, whatever, and didn't make provision for LGBT couples. It was then fixed actually before I even had this issue. So that was fine, although it was tortuous trying to find the right bit of the motion to the House that had to sort out. It was ridiculous. But we are still working through the fact that my deputy, Paulette Hamilton, who's a Labour MP, took the chair of the committee for the 6 months that I was able to spend time with my new baby. And that's never been done before. And we now need to work through what that looks like so that in the future, if this happens again, which no doubt it will, I am not going to be the last person as a select committee chair to do this. I hope, I'm sure that's the case. And so we just need to catch up. But it's just another reminder of how Parliament doesn't think things through. Yes.
Right?
I was really genuinely surprised. Yeah, I was also surprised. I was like, this has been sorted out before us. And so it just reminds me sometimes. I've been an MP for nearly 10 years now, which makes me feel so old. But I'm also reminded that this is a ancient institution. Yep. It behaves like an ancient institution. And sometimes just by being there, you break glass ceilings just by existing. And this was one of these moments where even though on the one hand, I am now long in the tooth, considered by MP standards, elder for the purposes of Parliament, and yet we're breaking glass ceilings within Parliament itself just by being here. And that's kind of cool. Yeah. So it just says, to people always out there who are like, should I be part of it? I don't see myself represented and all of that stuff. Should I stand? There are always these things that just magically happen.
And it's a constant struggle. We cannot ever take for granted hard-won rights. We've got to constantly battle for them to keep them, because we know that there are headwinds in the other direction that would put you right back in your box.
Without a doubt.
What is it I say? Equality is a garden that keeps needing tending because the weeds don't stop growing.
Quiet, Riot. It was January 2009. Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, trying to deal with an ever-expanding mess called the global financial crisis, causing Andy Burnham to consider mounting a leadership challenge. The Best Actress Academy Award went to Kate Winslet. The Best Supporting Actress Award went to Kate Winslet. LaToya Jackson, Ulrika Johnson and Giles Dickens had just entered the Celebrity Big Brother house, which was won, I'm guessing, by Kate Winslet. The Office for National Statistics confirmed that Britain was in recession, causing Andy Burnham to consider mounting a leadership challenge. Barack Obama was inaugurated as the 44th US president. Beyoncé was in the charts with Single Ladies, and a young artist called Lady Gaga, she was breaking through globally. A new viral trend called Rickrolling was sweeping through the internet, while a cold snap brought temperatures of -17 to Manchester, causing Andy Burnham to consider mounting a leadership challenge. It was in January 2009, 17 years ago, that then Transport Secretary Jeff Hoon announced Her Majesty's government would extend high-speed rail, which linked London to the Channel Tunnel, all the way to Birmingham initially, then all the way up to Scotland. This came to be known as HS2.
I hope this will be a blueprint for the future of high-speed rail travel in the United Kingdom. We will receive advice later this month from the company formed for High Speed 2 to make the case for a national high-speed rail network across this country. Today's event is a great example of the investment we need. Trains on time, trains of high standard, trains able to go faster. The Dame Kelly Holmes train that we are launching today, one of the best of Britain for the future, thanking one of the best athletes we have ever had in our country.
The project was meant to cost £37 billion and reach full capacity, and indeed reach Scotland, by 2025. And it was that same month, January 2009, that approval was also granted for, pause, a third runway and sixth terminal for Heathrow Airport. Well, fast forward to this week, and a new report is predicting HS2 will cost more than £100 billion just to get to Birmingham, and the first trains will not run until 2039, a full 30 years from its approval. As for Heathrow, well, there is a third runway at Heathrow, but it's reserved exclusively for landing pigs. So, let us ask, quite bluntly, why is this country so utterly shit at building anything?
Bit harsh.
All right, Naomi, you can kick things off with this. What was in the HS2 report then?
It just told us everything we already knew, but with a knighthood attached to it. Sir Stephen Lovegrove, former National Security Advisor, was commissioned to look at the civil service's role in the HS2 disaster, because I think, financially, that's all we can call it. And his findings were about as flattering as a passport photo. The top speed has now been reduced quite a bit, I think down to, is it 320 kilometres an hour? And Heidi Alexander is spinning that as sensible European alignment, which normally would be a phrase that would be music to my ears, but it's essentially an admission that we spent years engineering for a record no one needed us to break.
Incredible.
And then there are the numbers, which are the really staggering bit. When initially announced in 2011, I think, the estimated cost was 32.7 billion. For the entire route, all the way, that whole route that Kenny outlined, London to Birmingham, on to Manchester and Leeds. And the Manchester and Leeds legs...
They connected through the middle, yeah.
They have since been cancelled entirely, as we know, and what remains is about 135 miles of railway between London and Birmingham. And the latest cost estimate, remember, it was 32.7, it is now 87.7. and 102.7 billion, and you've got 44.2 billion already spent. So in perspective, and I think it was ITV that pointed out this figure, is higher than the cost of NASA's Artemis rocket to the moon. Yep. And we are getting less than half the route that was originally promised. The first trains are now also going to be delayed, not expected until somewhere between 2036 and 39. With the full line to Euston potentially not finished until 2043. Euston having its own problems now, saying we haven't got the concourse capacity. And remember, this whole project is about increasing capacity. It's about trying to encourage people onto train use and off of cars. It's just not going to really, meet that mission at all, given the constraints that are now being put on it. So that full line to Euston potentially not finished until 2043. Anyway, the novel bit of information in all of this is that according to HS2's own chief executive, cancelling the project at this stage would cost roughly as much as completing it.
Yeah.
And deliver none of the benefits. So we are, in the most expensive possible sense, committed.
It gives me no pleasure to say the expected cost of completing HS2 is now between £87.7 billion and £102.7 billion priced in 2025. Two-thirds of this increase is down to past misunderstanding of the work required, underestimation and inefficiency, issues within the control of HS2 Limited, some of its suppliers and previous governments. The remaining third is linked to inflation, which was not factored into previous cost estimates regularly enough.
Who knew that when the zombie apocalypse finally came, it would be a relief? I mean, Layla, you are the closest person to someone we can blame about this.
You know what?
How did this happen?
I'm getting PTSD.
What is going on?
So in my first parliament, I sat on the thing called the Public Accounts Committee. That's the oldest select committee. It's the one that all parliaments across the world have. And its job is to scrutinise government spending. And by default, anything that's spending over about 100 million can be referred. It's the one that directly linked to the National Audit Office. Mm. And I vividly remember in my sort of apprenticeship years of being an MP, the committee looking at HS2. An excoriating report was produced by the National Audit Office. We could not have been more forthright about what a shit show it was turning into. One of the exchanges that we had in that hearing was with an official who I think basically admitted one of the things that went wrong in the early stages was when they came up with the original estimate, they didn't adequately account for house prices in the south of England. So, and I'm going to paraphrase this and I'm probably getting it slightly wrong, but my memory tells me that what kind of happened is someone relatively junior, not quite an intern, but actually relatively entry level, drew a straight line, then drew some quite, basic concentric circles around towns, villages, etc., that they would have to do these compulsory purchase orders, took an average house price in the whole borough, not recognising that actually a lot of the places it's going through are some of the most expensive towns and villages in the country. And then when they had to go back and redo some of those costings, they were like, oops, it's literally double, triple what we thought it was before.
Did they think they were in China?
I honestly haven't got a clue.
Because that's how China would do it.
we were...
That's why they would get it done in 2 years.
Yeah, we were
They would just draw
aghast.
a straight line and just flatten the villages in between.
Well, and I'm glad we're not doing that, but we were aghast at the level of incompetence of the planning stage. And this is what I see over and over and over again. So in answer to the thesis question, why are we so shit at this? I think there is something about procurement. Can we please get geeky about procurement? There is something about the way that Whitehall decides how big a project is in its outset, not fully getting that well costed to begin with. And then when it comes down to, and it's all projects, you build a house and it ends up being more expensive. This happens to all projects. But when it comes to national infrastructure projects, when it comes to taxpayers' money, when it comes to the initial vote where everyone is excited about delivering this and its cost benefits and everything else, you've got to get it right first time. And government just seems incapable of doing it. And my answer to the problem is listen to the National Audit Office more. They come up with practical ways that they can do this better. Yeah. And at the moment, their job is scrutinizing, but very often the different departments just don't have the expertise built into those departments to get the initial costings right and the initial planning right. And then we find ourselves, as with all projects, not just that one, East Roswell is another one that affects Oxford, for example, over and over again, delays and
But one of the
costs.
delays that came up in the report is because of the fact that they failed to build in testing time to test the trains on the track, right? But that was also what caused the Crossrail delay. Yeah. So in living memory, a lot of the same people working in the Department of Transport on the same mega project scale have already butted up against this problem. You can't really forgive it for Crossrail, but you can go, okay, fine. Can we please never do this again? Oh, no. Second time around, High Speed 2 failed to factor in the time to actually test this track out before putting passengers on it. So there is... I think you're right. I think you've got to listen to the audit office more. As a management accountant, 90% of a project's costs get locked in at design stage. You always bring your management accountant into the room when you're planning this stuff out. But I think there's a governance issue there. I think there is a real issue about the tangle of overlapping accountability structures, lines of reporting, authority being unclear, multiple senior officials nominally responsible and therefore in practice nobody being truly responsible. And I think the report found that all players at HS2 Limited and the Department for Transport fell under significant pressure from ministers to just keep it moving, keep it going. And Heidi Alexander is now blaming the Tories are blaming Labour's original consultation, and everyone is blaming a revolving door of project managers and ministers who apparently
the 2009-2010 thing was
Labour apparently. Yeah.
And they didn't notice in the intervening 14
But I think there is an interesting point here about throwing good money after bad. And we made this point when we were looking at it, and it had already been made several times then. There comes a point sometimes where you have this great idea, you start a big project, and there comes a point where actually we are really bad at stopping bad projects. That's the other thing that we do badly. Other countries are better at this. I don't know why. Maybe we're just so invested that, and I think there's also something around when we're looking at economic forecasting. And when the Treasury is looking at how do we shift the dial on, what growth looks like at the OBR level, you talked about Heathrow's runway, for example. And I remember thinking Rachel Reeves' first budget was a list of politically unpalatable things that the Treasury had been trying to get through for ages. Why? Because if you can push the dial for the OBR forecasts just that little bit, you end up with meeting your fiscal rules a bit more and you can spend more on public services. So I understand why the Treasury pushes for these things to keep going, because if it's still on the books as a maybe, and then you start bringing bits of it back into play, it can start feeding back into economic forecasts.
Which was why the OBR did that big recalculation and said,
but I mean,
we may have been a bit optimistic about...
I think the whole design was crap anyway. Imagine not linking it up with HS1, which is a quarter of a mile down the road.
Yeah.
But also why wouldn't you? Networks are all about capacity building.
Can I add something from personal experience, which I genuinely don't know if it's widely known. I only know it because I lived in a house in Peckham at the time, and I know that the main renter, as it were, like there was a whole bunch of us that were subletting from someone, and the main renter ended up buying this massive 6-7 bedroom house for 60 grand because apparently Network Rail had bought a whole bunch of properties because they thought they were bringing Eurostar to Waterloo East. And when it ended up going to Waterloo West, they ended up with this whole bunch of properties they didn't need and had to buy different ones and sold those off cheaply, giving whoever was a renter first refusal. And then it ended up in King's Cross, St. Pancras anyway.
That's one way to play the London property market.
I mean, the whole project was so front-loaded with problems, wasn't it? Given all that, is anybody actually asking right now, look, is this a project that is worth carrying on? I mean, you hinted at the sunk cost fallacy, Layla.
Yeah.
But is there a case to be
But
made?
Naomi kind of said that we're now past that point.
I think we're past
We're
that
past the tipping point where it would cost...
We might as well get the benefit now.
Where it would cost just
to
as much
undo it.
to
Well,
not do
yeah.
it.
No, it's
You
got to
see,
happen.
I would kind of...
I mean, what kind of country are we?
Look,
like, it's
I
just
would,
a kind of
So I would
decline
center the
is-
problem somewhere else. There is this propensity for only wanting to announce grandiose things. So it has to be some massive plan, the tallest building ever, the biggest...
I don't know. They can't even do a Bakerloo line extension down the Old Kent Road, which is hardly like a mega.
But that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
That...
They can't do it either. They can't do the low end or the high end.
But that's the point. If in 2009 someone had said, let's just open an additional link to Birmingham as a first stage to increase capacity of that line, it would be done by now, I think.
Probably.
And
that's fair.
there's a good
But
argument
the
there as well,
point
because
is, they then go, no, we're going to build the Hanging Gardens of Babylon on top of it, and it never gets done because it's unrealistic to start with. If you had started with that bit and then added the bit to Manchester, it would probably be done by
But
now.
equally, I mean, I remember at the time, why didn't they start in Manchester? The original rhetoric was about joining up the north to the south. And actually, a lot of this came during Boris Johnson's levelling up era. And it has been a chronic issue of our country that we have not unlocked the economic potential of the north of England. And this was one of the answers to that. That was the ridiculousness of the
you
northern...
needed Crossrail of the North.
You needed Crossrail. And many people will point out that actually the real issue with the north is not north-south. Tim Farron points out this is a London-centric way of looking at the problems of the north of England, because everyone in the north, all they ever want to do is get to London, when in fact, no, they don't. They want to go east-west.
They want to go from Edinburgh to Glasgow in Scotland. I mean, it staggers me that it takes so long to go
and it's not an issue around speed. The comms around this have always been problematic because what we need in this country is capacity.
Yeah.
And if you build the capacity, the speed becomes less of an issue. People adapt to it. But by focusing on the speed, by spending money on building high-speed rail links that we don't actually need now, they killed something that could have introduced capacity to the north of England simultaneously with additional bits of capacity elsewhere. And then at some point later, you start to join
I'd
up on
settle for Wi-Fi in the centre of a major city in the UK right now.
Yeah.
Like that, I mean, that is what we're talking about. You know, you go to any other country, pretty much, in the developed world, certainly it's a horrible phrase, but shorthand, and you'll get 5G everywhere. I can't get it on Whitehall.
I'm quite happy with 2 hours to Manchester. I think you need a little bit of time to prepare yourself for going up north.
I don't like this fast train because I don't like being early. You're just going to be hanging about. Get a slow one, keep warm.
I don't think you will be early because it's not going to be built for 20 years.
Yeah. 2033, isn't it?
Yes, it's going to be finished in 2033.
I thought we'd be teleporting by then. I haven't got jetpacks, I don't want to be alive, let alone clinging on for life in a super fast buffet car, like.
Too fast, isn't it?
Too fast.
You'll have to change train impressions for kids. Like, it can't go... Won't do that, will it? It'll just go...
I wrote a little song to remind you, Choice Hotels get you more of the experiences you value. The Cambria Hotel's got it all. A rooftop bar, have a ball. Bring a date, your squad, or even your mom. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Quiet, Riot.
I've been looking at nuclear power.
Right, yeah, I was going to ask you about
well,
that.
and you get the mirror image of exactly the same thing, because, again, the announcement comes as we're going to build 3 brand new, massive, full-size power stations.
Hanging Gardens of Babylon again.
You award the contract to China. I mean, what was Cameron thinking? And you end up with that being cancelled and someone else being brought in. Then it's down to one of them, and then, that doesn't get done. And so I'm quite happy at the current approach, which is to build smaller and faster. So we're now going to have the first kind of grouping of what are called modular nuclear reactors in Wilfer in Anglesey, which is the site of a decommissioned old nuclear plant. And the government has just signed a sort of landmark contract with Rolls-Royce to do it. And what gladdens my heart particularly about that is that it is the new UK energy body that is doing this with Rolls-Royce, because I think the other problem that kind of moves invisibly under the surface is that with all the privatization that went on in the 80s and 90s, we ended up with expertise about this kind of big project being lost, and no one in government really knowing how to procure this kind of thing. They have no idea whether a contractor is ripping them off or not.
No.
Because that experience has been lost, and it's been lost to the private sector. And so I am glad that there is at least an attempt to redevelop that experience by saying there's this bit of government now that does this and co-owns and co-drives the projects. And I think that might make a difference. I mean, I'm not sure.
Well, I think in terms of HS2, this is a just get it done. This is a close your eyes and hope it's over situation. I think we're past
By the
point,
time we retire.
Yeah, but we're past the point of no return. Another reset. I mean, honestly, I rolled my eyes this morning when I saw what they were announcing. We're probably going to have another between now and then. It's probably going to be delayed again, but I think it will happen. I do think it will happen. What frustrates me is how we are not learning the lessons every time. No. And I think this is the point you were making, Naomi. Yeah. And, we need some longevity. And I think the volatility in British politics is also not helping.
Do we need a Ministry of Works? Like, do we need to just kind of bring back some kind of department that just does so much more exclusively this?
Well, it's not a bad thought because, I mean...
Social housing.
Exactly that.
Infrastructure projects, energy infrastructure.
Well, and it's not just the huge projects. It's not just nuclear reactors. It's not just airports and runways. It's not just high-speed rail links as well. I mean, we struggle in this country with the likes of housing, which globally is a huge challenge. But housing is one of those areas in which small changes can be made, incrementally, very quickly across the country, if the political will is there and if the local opposition isn't too great either. It's something, Naomi, you've got opinions on, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, so I used to run a housing campaign called 50,000 Homes, which was putting pressure on the London Mayor to build out at a rate of at least 50,000 new homes per year in the capital.
How's that going?
Well, let's look nationally and then we'll go back to London. So for listeners' benefit, Labour pledged to build 1.5 million new homes in the first 5 years of their tenure. That would require delivering 50% more than the previous government managed over the same time period. So a really big step change and one that's needed. In order to do that, they would need to be building about 330,000 new homes a year consistently across the Parliament. And we now know that they're nowhere near that. Between July 24, when they take over, and March 2026, mid-March, estimates are about a net addition of 342,000 homes, and that's about 23% of the 1.5 million target delivered, while about a third of the parliamentary term has already passed. Okay,
but wouldn't you expect it to have a kind of incremental curve? You
No.
come into government, wouldn't you expect to build
accelerate-
200 the first year, 300 the second, 400 and then 500?
Other people who know about this stuff have looked at it. So they're running at roughly 2/3 of the pace that they need to be to hit target.
Right.
OBR have done the math. It's not flattering. They think government are going to miss its target by the end of the Parliament. And a think tank called Britain Remade, who track planning applications as a forward indicator, have been pretty blunt about this. And they've said, with full planning applications showing no meaningful progress, so it's not the planning system holding it up. Time has probably run out already for hitting the target.
So there's not an increase in applications,
Exactly,
is what you're saying.
exactly.
Right.
And this is all obviously linked to economic woes. In London, the story is more than disappointing. It's pretty alarming. Obviously, a part of the country where house prices are most inflated, where supply has been compounded year on year in terms of its inability to deliver. And London was meant to deliver about 440,000 of the 1.5 million target. So almost a third of the total was going to have to come from the capital. And that would require 88,000 a year. Now, bearing in mind, they were not even building close to the 50 that they needed to expand that up to 88 was always going to be a stretch. There's a company called Molio, who are the real analysts in a lot of this. Only 5,500 homes were started in the capital last year. That's an 84% drop from the previous decade. Local authorities started construction on 90 homes.
90.
In the last financial year, which is a 95% reduction on the prior year. Housing associations, of course, who also build a lot of the social homes that we need. Similarly, their starts in London fell by 78% last year. And in Q1 of 2025, 23 of London's 33 boroughs recorded zero housing starts at all. So it's looking highly unlikely that they're going to even come close to meeting their target by the end
So
of the Parliament.
can I offer a outside of London, slightly more rural perspective to some of this? So first of all, Oxfordshire, close proximity to London, faces a lot of the same inflated house prices issue. There's a huge skepticism in the population around building more houses, just because if the argument for building more houses is that houses will become more affordable, in the southeast that's not true. All that building more houses will do is potentially take out the sting of ever-increasing house prices. But it will not do what people in communities want it to do, which is if you have a family and you want to stay close to your parents so you get grandparent care because childcare is so expensive and you don't want to leave your school friends, etc., that won't happen, because when those houses are built, what has happened in Oxfordshire is people move out of the very, very, very super inflated places like London, and they end up being sold. So the cheapest house that you could buy on a recent estate that went up for sale in Oxfordshire, starting price for a one bedroom was something like 330,000, way out of reach for that first time buyer. So they are so understandably reticent about saying yes to that. That then feeds into the politics, that then leads to campaigns, and you'll get called a NIMBY because actually what you're trying to do is deliver what your communities want.
We need social building.
Well, this is it. That's what I was getting to.
Council homes.
So Liberal Democrat policy is not just a headline figure of house building, but specifically a social homes house building figure where you focus, and the way you deliver that is you devolve it. So this is a fundamental difference. People often ask, what's the difference between us and Labour? Well, here's one clear one. Labour's answer to this is centralise it, force it through, take the power away from communities, and government's going to deliver. Well, we just spoke about how bad government is at delivering major projects like this. The Liberal Democrat approach is, actually, if you give this power to communities, if you let their local councils who know them best
borrow
to be able to build this, and then, and this is critical, if you make sure that rather than sort of random pots of money for roads, GP services, schools, I mean, we have a ridiculous situation nearby where I am in Didcot, where they built a massive estate, promised a GP surgery, and there is a fallow field where the footprint of the building is meant to be. But because of the way the planning system works, you can't force the NHS to build there. And in fact, and this is a whole other kettle of fish here, roles of district valuers and how primary care funding works. But basically, it's proving almost impossible to build a new GP surgery in the middle of this enormous new estate that they've just built in this area. I know, Kenny's face is just like, what? Yeah. So this is, so all of this needs sorting. But the answer to this is not take it into Whitehall, who are so good not at delivering this stuff. The answer to this is give local councils the powers that they need, give them the funding that they need, get them into a conversation with their local communities about how to deliver this. And I guarantee you they will deliver it.
Quiet Riot. Expedia and Visit Scotland invite you to come step into centuries of history that await in Scotland. Castles steeped in legend, walk along cobblestone streets. Come share the warmth of stories passed down through generations. This is a place with a past that is fully present today and all yours to explore. Plan your Scottish escape today at expedia.com/Visit Scotland.
Quiet Riot. Layla, can I very gently push back? Because I hear what you're saying, but when you say people are skeptical in the area, communities may not want it, what I hear is people who
have a home. If you want to build 50,000 homes in an area, of course the people already there will not want it.
No, that's not true.
But
there are examples.
Where are the interests of the people who don't have a home?
Well, those are the
represented? That's.
I will push back to say those are their children. It is the children growing up who want to live in that same village who are the ones who are pushing for this to happen. But even those same people, when they are told that, we might be forcing this on you without any of the extra infrastructure, without the bus services that are going to help you get into that town, it needs to be more joined up. And what we have seen, where this has been done well, particularly with neighbourhood plans, which often don't get spoken about in the context of planning, and that is really ultra-localised. A lot of the funding for those have been cut. What we've seen over time is where you allow those communities to have a meaningful engagement about not if the houses are coming, where the houses go, what they look like, what infrastructure is going to be built around them. They engage positively and more houses get built. And I should say, I'm saying this from the point of view of the Vale of Whitehorse District Council, where I live, had the highest rate of house building in the country. So I am not talking from the perspective of a community that said no, quite the opposite. But what I am reflecting is what then happened after all the houses were built and the house prices did not go down and the infrastructure never came. And so we've got to answer those questions. Now, Labour are saying they're answering them by bringing it all into Whitehall and taking power away from those communities. And I just think that's absolutely the wrong approach.
You may be right. I don't understand the intricacies.
It's important. The intricacies matter, though.
I get it.
Because they're what stop the things happening.
But what was certain was that what was going on before wasn't working. And so they're going for a change that you disagree with, but it's a change. And if it doesn't work, then you can do a different change. I'm still of the impression that people who have property have a disproportionate influence. Like even on the basics of a planning application, you will only get a say, you will only get sent a letter if you already have a house in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. And
and so there isn't anyone to push against the fact that maybe your view does not matter more.
What we need is land value taxation.
Than families with children living in temporary accommodation. Maybe you just have to sacrifice a little bit of your view.
You're mischaracterizing the people who often object to this stuff. In my experience, there are some who are genuine NIMBYs, right? There are genuine just people, and they bought their lovely house next to a field and they're upset that field's not going to be an empty field anymore. I get it. But that's not who I'm talking about here. The vast majority of people I speak to are genuinely understanding. They're not stupid. They see it for themselves. As I say, it's their own children who can't live nearby as a result of this not happening. They want houses to be built, but they also recognise that it can't be, a house is not a community. And I genuinely feel that we can't just have these broad brush characterizations. I also agree with you for what it's worth. It's not just people without home. It's young people. It's, there are a whole number of people. Yeah, it's generational. Who is the type of person in this country who gets listened to the most? It's the home-owning older person who's generally quite healthy. Like, those are the people who decide what happens. I, as a Liberal Democrat, I am in this role because I think we have to advocate for the voiceless. That's why I'm here. Otherwise, what's the bloody point? So I'm with you 100%. But I also really get frustrated by this broad brush characterization of, well, if you raise any concern about house building, you're immediately an NIMBY. I understand the frustration for where that comes. I'm not saying you said that. I understand where that frustration comes from, but it's actually not helpful because I want to engage with here are all the reasons why people do object. Let's take those away.
Look, completely with you. It is also true to say the exact opposite, that everyone thinks their objection is legitimate. I've never met anyone who just objects to something being built because they're assholes. Everyone thinks that their objection is totally legitimate. And so you could say that too.
But the point of the process should be that if you raise an objection, then it gets answered. So if someone raises an objection by saying, I want this GP surgery built, and then they don't get any assurance at all that it's going to be built. And in fact, the system shows them over and over again that where this has been built, the GP surgery never follows. I understand why they keep their objection on the table. So I think, I don't mind people objecting. I think it's a very useful thing to flesh out the issues. And in every single planning application, there are tiny minutiae of issues that officers will be dealing with every day, and it is right that they are dealt with. I don't see objection in and of itself as a bad thing. I think it's a democratic thing. But the key thing for government to do and local councils to do is adequately address the objections, and that's what doesn't happen.
Well, let's move on to some infrastructure that has been very heavily objected to by people for a range of reasons, not least climate. Kenny, dare I ask where we're at with the Heathrow expansion, that
there's one of those noises.
terminal and third runway?
We've gone through a lot of detail, so I'm not going to fall into the trap of going through tons more detail. But Heathrow is, I think, the great zombie infrastructure project in this country. It was backed, first of all, by the government way back in 2003. We'd only just recovered from the Y2K scare when we thought all our computers and watches and calculators were going to stop working. So 2003. Then it was backed by the Brown government, killed, revived, litigated, politically pulled apart, blessed again, and still not actually built. And we'll know it's built because the way things are going, we'll be able to tell because part of the M25 will actually have moved. Another huge infrastructure will be dug up, stuck underground. Just for context, we mentioned at the beginning the fact that America is sending people back to the moon for less than the cost of HS2. When Kennedy announced that America was going to put a man on the moon, it took them 8 years. 8 years with bits of string and fuse wire and clockwork computers and technology that we didn't know, it was just going to kill people relentlessly. 8 years is what it took with political focus, a lot of money.
So do we need the Russians to be in a race to do an extra terminal in Moscow to kind of force our government
No,
to
I think he's saying it'd be easier to get to Birmingham by rocket.
I mean, what was happening right now, though? I mean, you're partly true there, particularly about
because it was a race, right? So
it was a race. That's right. There was ego. There was a Big Willie contest. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Big Willie contests don't exist in big infrastructure projects like this because, of course, there isn't any competition. That's one of the problems. And that's why I think that what we've got right now, you asked the question, Alex, that there's a planning decision hoped for by 2029. A planning decision. Give us another 2 or 3 years. We've only had 30.
That's ridiculous.
And then the most optimistic thing is that the government hopes to have another runway operating by, I've written it down because I didn't believe it, by 2035. So in other words...
That's quite soon in infrastructure terms, to be honest.
6 years.
I doubt that.
It's never going to happen.
It's going to be met.
There'll be newts, there'll be bats, there'll be objections, there'll be all the usual things. And of course, there'll be at least 2, maybe 3, maybe 4 more governments between now and 2035, which will put a full stop on parts of the project. And
leave the newts and bats alone, you
That's what they say. That's what's holding it up.
600 million for a bat shed is one of the things that has blown the cost of HS1, isn't it?
And it's obviously bullshit. It's obviously bullshit.
I think you raised a really important point, though, about the political volatility of the country and how that has also contributed to all of this.
Short-termism.
Short-termism, the civil servants. And I remember asking one of them, again, in Public Accounts Committee, I'm perennially frustrated by government's inability to look to the medium and long term. And where I sit as Health and Social Care Select Committee Chair, you could apply that to so many parts of the NHS and especially social care. That sort of 10-year, 20-year horizon, yet with spending reviews that only really last a maximum of 3 years. And when I asked, well, why can't we properly plan financially for the future? One of the reasons they give is that you can't bind the hands of the next government for decisions made by this one. It's just not how Whitehall operates. It's one of the sort of underlying axioms of how it operates. And so there kind of always needs to be a sort of in the back of your mind get out clause. So when you hit a point in our politics, which we are at, where you just don't know what the next government flavour might be, and also not just that, because, you might have had Labour, Conservative, Coalition, whatever it was, but there was a broad consensus on things like climate change, on things like economic growth. Yes, we wanted it more sustainable, but, it was sort of market-driven with strong regulation. We'd kind of small L liberals decided what our society was going to look like, and then it was splitting hairs about how it was done. Yeah. Now we're not. Now we are, it feels very much politically, in a fight about what kind of country do we want to end up looking like. Some of the populists have actual answers and ideas about that. Some claim they're going to have ideas about that. But meanwhile, this volatility is stopping Whitehall from coming up with properly long-term stable solutions to some of these issues. Yeah. So I think this is only going to get worse, not better.
Would also help to drive people away from populism.
It would. There's one area where long-term planning seems to be okay, though, and that's where there's a profit motive, a clear profit motive for the private sector. You only have to look at power pricing in this country to get power stations built, even the small nuclear reactors, to get large-scale renewable energy online and onto the grid as well. Government has to be prepared to guarantee minimum prices to those companies that stretch far beyond the lifetime of a parliament.
And when you look at Brunel building that first under Thames tunnel, he begins it, runs out of money, and so what does he do? He holds a candlelit supper in the shaft of the
I've been there.
Of the tunnel that they dug at Rotherhithe. He invites the richest people from across Victorian London to come and have this once in a lifetime, never before underground candlelit dinner, and then says to them all, you've got to pay to help finish this, gives them all that stake in it, and bang, it happens. Fast forward, I don't know, century and a half, Crossrail, same thing happens. And it was my former boss, Baroness Jo Valentine at London First, who made sure that there were so many vested private interests in it that when the financial crisis struck in 08-09, and it was the mega project that you could have killed from the balance sheet to try and shore things up, they couldn't afford to do it because they would have to have paid out too much to the people that had invested in it. So it went ahead and it did get delivered. Late, but delivered, and quicker than any of the things that we talked about now.
A Greek friend of mine does this for a living. He's a project manager for big infrastructure projects. He has built railways, bridges, things like that, all over Europe, including France and Germany, and has done a couple of things here, but then stopped working here because he found the system so frustrating before Brexit, several years before Brexit, so it's not related to that. And knowing we were going to do this, I gave him a call last night and had a chat with him. And I said, what would you say is the fundamental difference? And his view is that there is like a noticeable, an elephant-sized difference in the amount of time that goes into the planning in a place like France or a place like Germany, and then the building happens very, very quickly.
This is what I was saying.
Yeah. And because what he says from a project management point of view, the more you extend the time of doing the thing, you can absolutely guarantee that your costs are going to run away, that there will be problems that you didn't foresee, that the more time passes, it basically adds variables. And so what he said was that the difference in the UK that he could see was that people were only interested in that groundbreaking moment with the shovels and the hard hats, because that's where the photo opportunity was. So no one was interested in developing a project that the next government was going to get
the credit
that
for.
photo op for, precisely as happened with the Boris bikes and the
Exactly
Olympics.
that, yeah.
And, we've seen it all before. But so what happened specifically with HS2 is that they just wanted that moment of the hard hats and the shovels. Each government wants that moment, and they do it precipitously. The moment they commit the funds to it, they want the photo opportunity that goes with it, and then discover all the planning issues. At that point, you can't cancel a project. That's exactly what happens. If you go into the planning stage and you scope out 5 routes for HS2, you find the one that works. If you decide on a route before because you want Gove with a hard hat and a shovel to be snapped doing it, you end up finding that route is not viable. And that's the big difference that he found. And, politics works the same in every country. But the fact is that if you create a steady stream of these things, everyone benefits roughly equally.
So are you saying it's also an issue of expectation management? So actually, we would be all better off by developing these things and announcing them later and just being a bit more humble about, yes, okay, this is the right thing for the country. Maybe in my humbleness, I'm not going to take the photo right now. I'm going to do it later.
Yeah.
And hope that actually by being there, it'll come back round and, you'll be part of it. I mean, maybe this is an argument for, those countries are very often also, by the way, often have coalitions.
Yeah.
So the parties who did have a vested interest in it in the first place often stay in government or stay close to government or will be back in government much sooner.
Yeah.
And so can keep delivering it. I mean, that's
and
possibly an argument for...
regional
and actually much stronger regional governments.
Yeah, regional government that has different stake in these things going ahead and whose electoral cycle is slightly different. So you don't get this, this congestion of suddenly 6 months to an election needing to have loads of those photo opportunities. And so anyway, that's his view from inside the profession.
Quiet, Riot. With Uber's new women preferences, women riders can request a woman driver whenever they want. Like Amy, who's traveling solo in a city she's never been to before. Or Danielle, who works night shifts at the hospital. Or Kelly and Jana, who were way overdue for a night out. Because sometimes comfort comes from having another woman with you. Request women drivers with women preferences on Uber. Learn more on the Uber app.
Quiet, Riot. It is that portion of the episode where we send a drone out to the political no man's land to take aerial shots of the latest culture war battle lines. It's time for Wokey Dokie.
Wokey Dokie.
Alex, what is the latest seemingly innocuous thing poisoning our green and pleasant land with wokery?
So this is not actually our green and pleasant land because it's coming from America, but it's a truly, truly strange one. So Florida as a state is pushing back on qualifications. I don't know how to say this in a way that makes sense. They don't like the AP classes, which is the equivalent of our, I guess, GCSE. The thing that...
APs, advanced placements. So this is
the thing that is the same across all states so that you can get credit for any university anywhere in the country, basically. And so it had gone through a process of passing legislation to have its own alternative classes that are less woke, because it thinks that stuff like psychology has been particularly poisoned by wokeism. And this is called the Florida Action Courses and Tests.
Fact.
Exactly.
Lol.
So that they can go fact in capital at the end of every sentence. And so they passed this big package of money to create this stuff, millions and millions of dollars, of which they've only spent about $100,000. Because it turns out it's not easy to do alternative
no shit,
courses.
Sherlock.
And the first one they did will surprise you, because so they tried to go out there and find someone to put together an alternative syllabus for psychology. But it turns out scientists are quite unmovable when it comes to things like psychology. And the first one they decided to do an alternative course on was algebra.
Excuse me?
What?
Alternative algebra.
Yeah. Alternative algebra.
No, but wait, hold on. I used to teach AP. What?
Yes, what is exactly the right question
I was a
to be
maths
asking?
teacher. I do not understand how
yeah.
this works. Tell me how this works, please.
So how this worked in practice was as follows. Because they found it very difficult to actually generate genuine alternative
there are
things.
different ways of approaching different mathematical problems, but none of them are a woke issue.
So what they did was they took a 16-week, one semester advanced algebra course from a university and stretched it over 36 weeks to offer it as advanced mathematics at a lower level.
Fine, you can, I suppose.
It was basically to justify having done this thing and then not being able to actually make it happen. So this was their easy way of doing it. It's created a massive problem because universities in Florida have said they will accept the credit, but universities everywhere else are saying no. So they have just progressed to the second fact course that they will offer, and this is history.
Oh, dear.
Okay, well, that is perhaps more, I can see where that came from.
Yes.
But algebra,
yeah,
what?
it is getting to the real meat of the situation, isn't it? The history course that they have launched, I'll just give you some examples. It uses the Bible as a primary historical source.
Of course.
Including saying that
Which one?
The Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, etc., are basically based on Genesis, because it is the foundation of Western views, apparently, of the universal equality of man, rooted in the view that all people are created in the image of God, and all fell with Adam. This is in an actual history course. They look at things like civil rights. So they look at Brown versus Board of Education, landmark case in America, 1954, which, was about segregation. It's a big, big thing. This is what they take away from it. I read the final sentence of a paragraph. It's just a paragraph on Brown versus Board of Education. And the last sentence reads, "This represented a substantial increase in the authority, involvement, and interference of the federal government in state and local matters." Their takeaway point was that racial equality was a way for the federal state to get involved, to get right up in your business. So yes, we now have alternative algebra and alternative history in Florida. And so the latest thing that is woke, what is it? Facts?
Facts.
Yeah.
Alternative facts.
You can prove anything with facts.
Facts are woke. Fact is not.
Thank you, Alex, and listeners. Do send through instances of wokey dokiness that you find through to quietriotpod@gmail.com. And that's the end of the more capital P politics newsy bit of the show. Thank you to everyone who's tuned in. If you can help support the show, head on over to ko-fi.com/quietriotpod for a $5 a month so we can keep bringing the show free to everyone at the same time, regardless of their ability to pay.
All that remains is to say a very brief à tout à l'heure, because we will be back tomorrow with that really sobering and honestly very touching discussion on Palestine.
We love you ever so much, and we really hope that with all this extra content, you don't get sick of us. Bye!
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Alex Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simone Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot.
Dropping all your into one file and just present you at the end of the year with one giant
I've got a little thing now where occasionally I'll drop a noise in just to see if Alex Reese picks it up. And he
Is it
does.
a
He starts
Scottish
putting
thing?
on.